Hey everyone, so this is not how I plan to start this one, but before getting into the whole shebang, there is an update of sorts that I need to get out. So the static that I raid with, we decided to take a break for the rest of this tier. At the moment of that decision, we were working our way through P8S. We'd seen all the mechanics before the big transition, but still had a lot of cleaning up to do. The thing is, this tier has been pretty rough for us. We had multiple players needing to step aside because of scheduling, there were computer problems, illness, and then there was the actual tier. The last boss in particular, much of the static really didn't like that encounter. Now personally, I like it a lot and still really want to get it down. But I also understand where my group is coming from, and that's what the majority wanted. So that's where I am at, and with all that out of the way, let's start talking about this tier. And I see no better place to start than the very first encounter, Carbuncle. Savage Carbuncle is my favorite raid encounter that I have ever done. This is a masterfully designed encounter. It delivers on all the aspects that I look for. It's visually interesting, all the mechanics have great animations, the mechanics are also really fun to learn, and executing them is very satisfying. And then there was the pacing. I never felt any kind of lull between the mechanics. It was just one interesting thing to the next. And I was always engaged with what was going on. Now, I could gush on about basically every mechanic here, but to keep this video from getting way too long, I'll just highlight two of them. So one mechanic that I thought was really cool is when the boss partitions the arena with these magic barriers into 4 quadrants. And then he starts to drop bombs randomly into the 4 quadrants. And you have to look at where they are dropping, try to remember where they dropped, and the order that they dropped in, and then afterwards you move yourself between the quadrants, using those magic barriers to block the explosions. This is such a fantastic mechanic. It's not only fun to do, it keeps you engaged. It feels really great to execute correctly. It's visually an interesting thing to do. It literally checks every single box for what I want out of a raid mechanic. Now, the other mechanic I wanted to highlight was the hungering mechanic, and this is where the boss shows an outline of the order that he is about to pounce around the arena, and you need to recognize the pattern and then start to move between the jumps. So not only does this mechanic require very precise timing and movement in order to resolve, it also looks really cool when you do it correctly. The boss is jumping right in front of you or directly behind you, and it feels like you are in this anime and moving so smoothly between the attacks. That's a really cool feeling to me. And really, I can't sing enough praises for this encounter. I only gave 2 examples for the mechanics, but I think all the mechanics here are great. And they set the bar so high with this one that my expectations were kind of out of this world. So the next encounter was against Hegemone, and how did she fare with those really high expectations? So Hegemone felt a little bit disappointing after Carbuncle. I mean, I still think it's a good encounter, but it was missing something. And that something, I think, is visual flair, something which Carbuncle had a ton of. Even thinking back to the previous tier's second encounter, Hippocampus, you had water levels rising and lowering, you had that mechanic that would pull you into another player, the boss would separate its head and body and then pounce around the arena, attacking you with both. Those kind of visuals really elevate the mechanics. And unfortunately, Hegemone was really lacking in that regard. Actually, my biggest disappointment with this encounter was that they removed a normal mode mechanic that I was really looking forward to seeing what it would be like in Savage. And the mechanic that I am referencing is the one where the boss turns clockwise while hitting 2 opposing cardinal directions with these huge AoEs. And I was really looking forward to seeing how this would work in Savage. Maybe we'd have to deal with the debuffs, or towers, or whatever else, while also needing to Mario Kart around, avoiding the AoEs. Basically, the big mechanic on Savage that repeats throughout the encounter is she places these tiles on the floor that can either have a cross or an X on them, and then they explode out in those directions, and you need to position yourself correctly not to get hit. Now, to add some spice to this mechanic, she can swap an X with a cross, just to keep you on your toes. Another big change on Savage is she can also swap players' debuffs around. Oh, you thought you had a donut AoE? Well, now it's a flare, so GTFO. My favorite mechanics, by far, were Cachexia 1 and 2. These were very involved mechanics that required precise movement, positioning, and some tight timing in order to clear them unscathed. There is just something so satisfying when you see your team doing a complicated mechanic correctly. It's sort of like watching one of those synchronized competitions, and everyone is moving so in sync and perfectly. It's kind of mesmerizing. Anyways, like I said, this is a good encounter with some really solid mechanics, but it's probably my least favorite fight of the entire raid series. Anyways, so next up is P7S Agistis. So this was a really cool encounter, and it also had a lot of that spectacle that I was missing with Hegemone. So one of the things I really liked was that the stage changes throughout the encounter. It starts off as this huge circular platform, then the boss tosses your raid into the air, and they land on these smaller platforms connected by bridges, and then the boss can use her branches to bust down the bridges, changing the stage yet again. And the mechanics here were engaging as well, visually and execution-wise. Much of the encounter is dealing with a variety of creatures that hatch from different eggs. You need to remember which creature came from which egg, and then make sure you are positioning correctly so that you aren't aiming their massive AoEs at any of your other raid members. Positioning is always important in every encounter, and something that you really start to appreciate is that they designed the stages to help you with that. There are always clues in the stage to help show you where you need to stand. Now, the only thing that took this encounter down for me was the pacing. I felt like they shoehorned all the really difficult mechanics for the ending. Up until that, I would say this encounter is on the easier side, especially for the third encounter in the tier, but they sure make up for that. Anyways, this is just a personal preference, but I am just not a huge fan of backloading all the really difficult stuff for the end. Like, imagine if on Hegemone, if Cachexia 1 and 2 were both saved for the very end of the encounter, and then you had to deal with them one after the other. That's what this encounter pretty much did. I guess I just like it better when the difficulty is more evenly spread out, rather than having it all at the end. I feel like that makes the pacing better, and the overall progression feel better. With all that being said, I still really enjoyed this encounter. It was a lot of fun to learn. Anyways, now we arrive at the final encounter, Hephaistos. So, this is the encounter that made my static want to take a break. Personally, I really love this encounter. I want to keep progressing on it, and see it through to the end. We've seen all the mechanics, it was really just a matter of cleaning things up. And I'll admit, there was a lot of cleaning up to do, but I felt like we could absolutely do it. But I also kind of get it. The way they handled some of the mechanics here made progressing and learning the encounter, well, let's just call it taxing. So this encounter has two major mechanics. We'll call them the snake mechanic and the minotaur mechanic. And they always happen at the same block of time in the encounter, but the order that they come out is random. And this is what made learning this encounter taxing. Those could change every other attempt. So it's not all that hard to imagine what that does to trying to learn a specific mechanic. So the question that I ask is, why randomize them? The only thing I could think of was to artificially lengthen how long it took to learn those individual mechanics. And I hesitate to say make it harder, because I feel like that's not a great way to go about making it harder. The mechanics themselves are the same. The order they come out in doesn't influence anything else. And once you do learn them, it really doesn't matter what order they come out in. I have a hypothetical. What if on P4S, after the transition, after you did the Act 1 mechanic, what if it was random if you got Act 2 or Act 4? Would that have made progressing the encounter a more enjoyable experience, or just more taxing and kind of annoying? And that's kind of how I feel about P8S. The randomness here just made the progression feel worse. And that's a shame, because the actual mechanics are amazing. So yeah, I overall think this was another really solid raid tier. When I think of all the raiding I've done over the years across MMORPGs, these encounters are absolutely cream of the crop type stuff. You know, the nitpicks I had really just pertain to my expectations from what I've seen in Final Fantasy XIV. You know, one of the criticisms I've seen about raiding in 14 is, once you learn the mechanics, the fights are easy. It's in the same vein as all the fights are just dances. It's framing something that is true of all PvE games, and then putting a negative spin on it. In World of Warcraft, can't every encounter be boiled down to a dance? Once you learn all the mechanics, don't the encounters become easy? It's just such a weird argument, but I still see it all the time, and it makes me wonder, would they say the same thing about a game like Elden Ring? The most difficult encounter in that game, Millennia, I would say is just a dance. You learn the steps, you learn her attack patterns, her mechanics, and the fight becomes easy, and now you are masterfully dodging, parrying, and blocking all her different attacks. Now for me, it took about 3 hours to learn Millennia, and that is considered the hardest fight in that game. Just for some context here, extremes in Final Fantasy XIV usually take about 3 hours to learn. And the thing about extremes is, they are considered to be the quote-unquote easier content. I just thought it was interesting how difficulty can sometimes be viewed between games. Anyways, that is all for this one. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching. If you did like what you saw, please consider subscribing for more, and until next time, bye!